Welcome to Measurably Better Learning, the podcast built for learning and development professionals. Whether you're an instructional designer, L&D professional, or corporate leader, get ready for insights and ideas that will transform your approach to learning, training, and development. So let's dive in.
Welcome to this episode of the Measurably Better Learning podcast. Today, my host is Dr. Jerry Zanstra, and we are actually returning to a topic we recently talked about. Our previous podcast, we talked about marketing and really framing that more as how to get the attention of our learners to motivate them to engage in the learning experience we've created. So for this podcast, we wanted to provide some really practical, let's talk through some examples or some ideas. So when it comes to when we say the attention of the learner, again, to clarify, we're not talking about in the learning experience, but how do we get them motivated to even want to engage with what we have?
Right.
What are some things that work? What have you seen?
Yeah, I the first thing that comes to mind is the coolest thing I think we've done, and it's only possible because of AI. So we are working with a company that has a mission critical learning objective, and so they really need to get the attention. And so we demonstrated to them using AI that we could take a photograph of their CEO. We made him photorealistic. Then AI wrote a script talking about, kind of the Simon Sinek why. Why do we need to do this? What's the big idea here? And then we had him read that script. The AI created an animation of him. It looked very much like him. And you could tell it was an animation. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It wasn't a deep fake thing.
No.
It was meant to say, okay, this is an animation.
Right.
Then we had him read that same script, not him, but through AI.
It was AI. It was not him, to clarify.
And I believe Vietnamese and maybe Hebrew or something.
It was two very obscure. I remember that.
Very different.
Just to make the point.
Just to make the point.
Yes, absolutely.
And when we showed it to the client, they said, How do you know him? How did you get him to do it? But
you're freaking me out a little.
It was a little freaky because it was his voice.
Yeah.
I believe it was Vietnamese was the language. It was his voice, and he was speaking Vietnamese. But it was an immediate attention. Back to your point, we're not talking about in the course how to keep a learner's attention. We're talking about how to get their attention and so that they pay or lend, as we talked about in the last podcast. They lend their attention and they exchange it. They exchange their attention with our learning material because they believe it's important. So that was one real. You can't go to that well every time.
And I think too, I love this example to start because it is a common instructional design strategy. Let's go to whoever in the company casts the vision. Who do people respect? Let's go to a leader, have them kind of explain. And it's powerful and motivating, but you can't do that very often because A, that content isn't evergreen, and B, that person is enormously busy. They don't really have the time to be bothered to record another video. And so this is a really great way to get the same effect without having to engage that person's time. And of course, we would want their approval, all of that. This is just an example.
It's not a good idea to put words in the mouth of your CEO
it's definitely
that
not.
he or she does not want in there. But again, play that limited.
Yes,
right. That's
agreed.
Don't play that card too often. But there are many ways to do this. There are some. The standard ones are games. You and I worked on a project a number of years ago. And again, this was not in the learning. This was all pre-learning.
Yes. Yeah.
These people the goal was to engage them in financial literacy. And so they took people manager level around the world. It was a global company. And they played, I think it was called 10-Minute Monopoly.
Yeah, it was a recognizable game, but very fast.
Very fast. And there's a version of it's a game you can play. It has to do with finance, and you have to play it very quickly. And the people who won, there were a series of tournaments. I don't know if it was double elimination or however it worked.
Remember.
Probably single elimination. But at the end, there was a team from around the world, and they were going to play a financial game that we actually created for them. And they were going to play it against the financial team of the CFO and his crew. And they were going to play each other. We did a little handicap thing. But the interesting thing is nobody was learning. They were only playing. Right?
Yeah.
But everybody was paying attention.
Crazy,
Could
yes.
this group of, managers outperform financially? It was a game played over time, and you had to make choices, and and those choices impacted your bottom line. And then at the end, you saw who won. There was a completion date, and then somebody put everything into marketing. Well, okay, you gain market share, but you don't have any cool research and development. You don't have
Nothing
any cool
to market later.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
So you have everybody's attention,
Right.
nothing to tell them.
Right.
But it was cool because by the time that game was released for them to play as an individual, they all knew what it was. They were all engaged in it.
Well, and I mean, compare that to, let's just roll it out. Next week, everybody, you need to sign up and play this game. I mean, the whole company was focused on it. And I think to kind of reference what we talked about in the last podcast, marketing has to be thought about at the beginning.
Yeah.
It was quite an endeavor. I mean, it was almost its own separate project to set up this contest, the 10-minute Monopoly, to host that, all the logistics to get down to that team.
There was pizza, there was
there
food
was all
and drinks.
kinds of things.
And prizes.
There
at
were
the end.
prizes,
I think
there
at
were.
the end, the non-finance team did actually beat the finance team and got like a 3-day trip. They got
It was
something
a lot.
really. It was a big thing,
Yeah.
and everybody was paying attention to that. Around you had everybody's attention. Now here comes the learning.
Yeah, it was
and,
amazing.
And it was that was really well done. It was a fun project to work on and intense, but worth it. I mean, they needed their managers to upskill in their financial knowledge and understanding.
Yeah, I love that example. And when we come back, we're going to talk about a few more.
Great.
Imagine a world where every training session, every learning module, and every translated document is aligned with your company's unique goals and global ambitions. Welcome to Ingenuity, where we don't just talk about elevating your corporate learning, we make it happen. At Ingenuity, we understand the heart of your business is its people. That's why we specialize in creating custom learning solutions and translation services that are not just effective, but are designed specifically for your business's global needs. Let us show you how learning cannot be just better, but measurably better, with solutions tailored just for you. Learn more in the description below.
All right, everybody, welcome back. We're going to turn the tables a little bit on Miriam. We've talked about some very high-end, very high visibility, high-profile ways to do this, the AI example, and then a pretty complex game.
Yeah, very complex.
Again, not things you can do for every learning initiative. Miriam, talk to us about sort of the middle range of things. You were involved in one learning project, I should say, that really marketed itself well. I think it was pointed at leadership.
Yeah, it was mission critical, and that I will say. But it was a leadership program that spanned the entire company, and whether it was aimed at a certain group of leaders, but then there's also, of course, you have a couple tiers below watching because that's where they eventually aim to be. It was a year-long training program, so it's pretty important.
Yeah.
So we really designed that almost as its own product. From the beginning, it had its own logo. It had a name because it was a program. Yes, it was leadership training, but
there were T-shirts.
There were T-shirts. There were
okay.
You had to apply to be accepted. So again, this is a different model, right? Not everything falls into this kind of learning experience, but those aspects were aimed to create excitement and to make sure that they had really high quality applicants. There were banners, there were lunch and learns to get people to hear more about the program, T-shirts, all of that. And I think those things probably feel a little more comfortable to our listeners. Like, I could probably engage maybe my marketing team to help me create some of that. Still has to be thought about ahead of time. It certainly can't be done the day we roll things out.
Right.
But a little bit more, I don't say mundane, but traditional, maybe traditional marketing examples.
What you mentioned a competitive application process. What are your thoughts about, instead of saying, hey, everybody, say we're going to take a first tier, you might even pick influencers, right? And that's one way to market things is to choose people. And again, influencers, sometimes it has nothing to do with their title. You can have a vice president that has very little influence and somebody who's cleaning the building, and everybody respects that person. So now I'm not talking about positional influence, just personal influence. You could create a competition to do that, or you could just focus on those big influencers in the company and arm them and have them actually send out the learning. What do you think about that?
Yeah, no, I actually, I love the influencer approach. There's a couple of things with that program in particular. Eventually it would be opened to others, but not everyone. And so you're really creating that demand, right? Because everybody's paying attention. What is this? How come I can't get in? Not everybody can get in. What makes them?
Scarcity.
Scarcity, exactly. Yeah. But I've also seen, so a lot of the work that I did early in my career was in school systems, and we have just the very beginning of online learning, and a fair amount of, I'd say, naysayers. We started saying things like, get on the bus, you're going to get run over, kind of a thing. Right. But what we often did, we did this a lot in universities, rather than trying to ram things down people's throats per se, we created that influencer. Let's look for the early adopters. Right. People that respect, let's generate the excitement that way. Let them take it, give us good feedback, talk to their colleagues, spread the word. And that's another way to create sort of that marketing buzz, is to go after anyone that you feel has influence, that's willing to share, to be a part of it. That creates a great sort of sense of also excitement.
Yeah, I think of movies that do that, We've talked about this too, but the movies upon their wide release, usually critics get an advance copy.
Yes, they do. Yeah.
And the reason why would you give your movie to a critic?
Right.
He or she might say really bad things because they're influential. And I might be somebody that goes, oh, well, I always look at such and such a person who's a critic. If he or she likes it, I'm in. That's probably something I'm going to pay attention, give my attention to. How about some of the other things? I mean, signage. Some of them, I don't call them mundane because they take work.
Yeah, they do.
They take intentionality. But, what are some of the other things that you've seen?
Yeah, so I mean, signage used to be really traditional, right? But we have this global world, lots and lots of digital. That's not always possible, but it's certainly possible to do what we call a digital signage. So all kinds of, if you're a company intranet, just posting announcements. That sounds silly, but it's getting the word out. Maybe an email or some other kind of, if you have
precursor,
a way to,
sort of a tease.
Coming soon kind of a thing.
Okay.
And one of the things we really like to do is sizzle reels.
Yeah.
The tricky thing about e-learning is that you might, e-learning in particular, or micro-learning, or you might have put something really interesting together. But first you have to sort of plow through maybe the first 5 minutes or something where there's company
Trust us, it gets better.
Compliance, right? All of
Some
that.
Some lawyer has their hand in there.
Exactly. And so what we've done is we've often grabbed the interesting parts of, let's say it's like 5 modules, and actually, clicked through it on the screen a little bit, showed things popping up, or put it to music and put some of those clips together. And it's like a 30-second sizzle reel. Well, coming soon to you, and there's a sizzle reel. And now at least our learners have this understanding, like, oh, there's really cool things in this. I'm going to be engaged and interested with just, I would call that like the equivalent of a signage. It's a digital, it's a commercial, so to speak. Yeah.
I think there's one last thing that needs to be said is every learning experience that you create is an opportunity for you to market the next one.
Yeah, absolutely.
So good
or not. Yes.
Good or not, right? You're either, adding to your brand or taking away from your brand. And again, it's like directors, right? Christopher Nolan movie, I'm probably going to go see. Right. I mean, it just, I don't even have any idea what the movie's about.
Right.
But if I've had a good experience with an actor, right, that's why different actors get paid different things, because they will inherently draw in, a certain number of people. So create good stuff. Might be a really good way to end this.
It sounds simple, but you're right. We talk all the time about learning culture, but if you don't create good things, it's just like constantly downgrading that culture. But if you're creating interesting, exciting things, it builds.
Yeah.
So,
great.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. And thanks everybody for your time today. Before we wrap up the show, if you're looking to dive deeper, we've got tons of free downloads, L&D resources, and details about upcoming webinars that you won't want to miss. They're found in the episode description. Plus, if you ever want to chat with either one of us, now's your chance. You can find links in the episode description to connect directly with Miriam or me. We're here to answer your questions and to discuss all things learning and development. And speaking of questions, we love hearing from you. Whether it's a question or a comment or a topic you're curious about, or if you just want to join the conversation, drop us a comment on your favorite social media channel. Your input shapes our shows. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast on your favorite platform. It's the best way to ensure you never miss out on our latest episode. We're excited to continue to transform learning into a measurable success with you. Until next time.